Ng Build Better More Infrastructure Forum, inilatag ni Department of Public Works and Highways Undersecretary Maria Catalina Cabral at Department of Transportation Undersecretary Timothy John Batan ang estado ng infrastructure flagship projects ng kanilang mga kagawaran. Gayon din ang mga proyektong naisakatuparan nila sa ilalim ng administrasyon ni Pangulong Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. Ipinaliwanag din ni Public and Private Partnerships Center Executive Director Maria Cynthia Hernandez ang mga pulisiya at proyekto sa ilalim ng Public and Private Partnerships upang mailatag ang strategic goals at key programs, funding at financing options, expenditures at budget allocation para sa infrastructure flagship projects. Sa sentro naman sa Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028 ang ikalawang araw ng Build Better More Infrastructure Forum. Tinalakay naman ni Secretary Sentro Balita ng National Economic and Development Authority o NEDA ang Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028.
In the past dozen years, the Philippine economy has grown comparatively fast, only briefly interrupted by the short contraction we felt during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. This economic performance marks a historic achievement, surpassing any growth episode since the 1970s. Last year, in 2023, despite economic or domestic and external challenges and risks, our country was one of the brightest spots in the region and among the emerging Asian economies. As you can see, the share of private construction relative to public sector construction has declined since the beginning of 2020. The economic team recognizes this, and we know the need to substantially improve the investment climate for the private sector to recover lost ground. Fortunately, the path ahead of us is clear. The Marcos administration's forward strategies are contained in the Philippine Development Plan, PDP 2023 to 2028, our nation's medium-term development blueprint. This roadmap, launched in the President's term, lays out the programs, policies, and legislative priorities to modernize our productive sector, enhance the social sector, and create an enabling environment to sustain the country's high-growth trajectory. The plan is anchored on the Filipino people's overall aspiration of a matatag, maginhawa at panatag na buhay as articulated in our ambition natin 2040. Aiming for no less than deep socioeconomic transformation, the PDP also identifies several cross-cutting strategies to be pursued as we strive to hit our desired targets measured along different dimensions of welfare and development, as you can see on this slide. I should mention that several of these strategies are particularly relevant to infrastructure development, such as enhancing physical and digital connectivity and leveraging public-private partnerships. The PDP seeks to address the challenges that affect our infrastructure sector, which, as many serious observers and analysts have remarked, is one of the most binding constraints to investment in our country. By expanding and upgrading our infrastructure, we aim to create the enabling condition for millions of Filipinos to generate high-quality jobs, raise the competitiveness of our local industries, diversify our growth drivers to strengthen economic resilience, and enhance regional connectivity by linking our leading and lagging regions. Again, we draw an understanding there is no other way to sustain our growth than through massive investments in various growth drivers, and this will require a strong push for infrastructure development. The Marcos administration acted quickly, and we have made a strong start this past 2 years. The government enacted key policy reforms and initiatives to create a more enabling policy and regulatory environment for investment and economic growth. We issued the amended Implementing Rules and Regulations, or IRR, of the Renewable Energy Act and the IRR of the amended Public Service Act to enable greater foreign investor participation in the provision of critical infrastructure. We passed the PPP code to strengthen our PPP framework and the private sector's role in financing, operating, and maintaining bankable infrastructure projects. We ratified the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, opening our economy to markets beyond our shores to strengthen trade and investment. President Marcos issued executive orders, or EOs, to streamline the processes for strategic investments, the construction of telecommunications and internet infrastructure, and the government's infrastructure flagship projects, or IFPs. As we move forward in the President's third year, we commit to tirelessly working on creating an even more enabling policy and regulatory environment as part of the infrastructure development agenda. Indeed, as you know, the Marcos administration commits to spending on an annual basis about 5 to 6% of our GDP on infrastructure to reduce the identified gaps and catch up with our more dynamic neighbors. The continued evaluation, approval, and rollout of the 185 infrastructure flagship projects under the Build Better More program is critical to achieving the 5 to 6% annual target. These game-changing, urgently needed, and big-ticket projects spanning various sectors collectively amount to 9.5 trillion pesos, or about 163 billion US dollars. Official Development Assistance, or ODA, is the most common funding source, funding nearly half of the projects on our list and accounting for 57.5% of the total cost. Given our fiscal space, we see PPPs as a key source of financing for 43 IFPs to augment the funding from the GAA, or General Appropriations Act. 63 of the 185 IFPs are ongoing. 31 have been approved for implementation, and 6 are already slated for government approval. We also find a significant number of IFPs in various stages of preparation as we ensure that these projects are designed to provide the Filipino people with the largest bang for the buck, so to speak. We aim to have many of these IFPs substantially implemented, if not fully completed, by 2028. As we accelerate our efforts to meet the President's deadline, we have been ramping up our efforts to address bottlenecks in the timely completion of these IFPs proactively. President Marcos has ordered the expedited processing of these projects. As I mentioned, just last April, the President signed EO 59 to streamline the government's permitting process for IFPs to ensure that no unnecessary delays would occur in providing licenses, clearances, or permits needed to approve and implement the IFPs at the national and local levels. As also mentioned, PPP should remain one of our key drivers for sustaining spending on physical and social infrastructure. Promisingly, the number of pipeline projects has grown over these past few months. As of early July, we have 205 PPP projects, including those with LGUs under implementation, and 143 projects in the pipeline. The majority of the upcoming projects are in physical and digital connectivity, and property development sectors. We are also encouraged to note that more social infrastructure projects in health, water and sanitation, and solid waste management are in the pipeline. With the passage of the PPP code, we expect to see the speedier rollout of more and more projects, including those involving LGUs in the years to come. Through the Legislative Executive Development Advisory Council, or LEDAC, the two branches of government have formulated a common legislative agenda to address primarily the constraints that impede the transformation of our production sectors, and which will pave the path for more robust infrastructure development. Through these reforms, we can even more progress toward further encouraging investment as we catch up with our neighbors and inspire greater confidence in our country as an investor destination. We aim to pass these priority measures before the end of the 19th Congress.
Susunod, funding at financial plans para sa Build Better More infrastructure projects kasama si Department of Finance Undersecretary Rolando Tungpalan.
PTV Consumer Watch, bantay presyo sa gasolina. Saan ka pa ba pupunta para sa balanse, responsable at makatotohanang pagbabalita? Hatid ng inyong pambansang TV ang mga premyadong programang pambalitaan na tinututukan ng sambayanan sa maghapon. Balitaang may puso matapos ang pananghalian sa Sentro Balita. Mainit na balita sa early evening prime time sa Ulat Bayan. At ang tuloy-tuloy na pagbibigay ng balitang makatotohanan tuwing Sabado at Linggo sa Ulat Bayan Weekend. Ang pinakasariwang multilingual news update sa PTV Balita Ngayon. PTV Balita Ngayon sa probinsya. PTV News Now at Stories from the Grid. Ang nangungunang English newscast sa free-to-air TV. PTV News Tonight. Ang latest sa mundo ng palakasan sa PTV Sports. Serbisyo, impormasyon, inspirasyon para sa bagong Pilipino. Kami ang inyong PTV, ang pambansang TV sa bagong Pilipinas.
Iba't na mga inisyatibo at mga proyekto ng administrasyon ay ang pagsisigurong may naaayon at sapat na financing options ang bawat infrastructure projects. Yan ang binigyang diin ni Undersecretary Rolando Tungpalan ng Department of Finance.
The Build Better More is our single most potent instrument for achieving investment-led and inclusive growth. Infrastructure has a large multiplier effect on the economy. The projects not only enhance mobility and productivity, but also improve the lives of our people through the creation of more jobs and businesses. They promote social welfare by bringing better health care and social services closer to local and underserved communities. They are the engines driving economic growth and dispersing the fruits of modernization to every corner of the country. The continuous rollout of the infrastructural build-up on this scale demands the lifeblood of funding. That is why Secretary RC prompted me to speak about how we are financing or how we are going to finance this very large, ambitious, but doable program. And it requires an expansionary fiscal posture, but with a well-managed deficit spending and long-term borrowing. That fiscal posture will have to be supported by a more robust revenue stream. This is where our tax administration efficiency and revenue reform measures come in. The Department of Finance is focusing on growing more revenues to fund our infrastructure projects by plugging tax leaks, improving tax administration to digitalization, and maximizing our non-revenues. While no new tax proposals are on the table, refined revenue reforms await congressional approval that would inject additional revenues into our coffers. Key structural reforms such as the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, amendments to the Public Service Act, Retail Trade Liberalization Act, and Foreign Investment Act aim to attract investors through the provision of improved fiscal incentives and the lowering of minimum capital requirements for those who wish to invest or locate their businesses in our country. With this, we anticipate an average of 10.3% average annual growth rate in total revenues, reaching some 4.27 trillion pesos in 2024 and to 6.25 trillion pesos by 2028. This will help reverse the anemic underspending of only about 2% of GDP for public infrastructure over the last 3 decades. We already saw a dramatic shift when President Marcos took office, bringing this number up to 5.8% in 2023, the highest in our history. Over the next 4 years, we aim to sustain this momentum and hit up to 6% of GDP annually to make up for the lost time and rapidly raise our global competitiveness. With our credible fiscal position, the Build Better More program also attracted strong support from our development partners through very concessional official development assistance, or what we call ODA. Since the start of the President's term, we have secured ODA funding of about $7.2 billion, the bulk of which is from Japan through the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA. Notable among these ODA-funded projects are the North-South Commuter Rail that would serve Los Baños, Tutuban, Malolos, Clark, the Metro Manila Subway, the Dalton Pass East Alignment, and soon to be bidded out, what I call the Bat Cave, or the Bataan-Cavite Interlink Bridge. Bataan-Cavite, so that's Bat Cave in short, no? Constituting 58% of the funding source for our IFPs, or the infrastructure flagship projects, ODA borrowings allow us to continue spending productively without straining our fiscal space. ODAs provide the most concessional financing with lower interest rates, longer grace periods, and longer amortization or maturity period. They also give us greater flexibility to fine-tune major projects to align with the interests of the Filipino public without making compromises with project proponents and concessionaires. Through ODAs, we are able to unlock, access, and benefit from foreign capital, knowledge and technology, expertise and experience offered by our development partners. Our ODA-funded project preparation facilities, such as the Infrastructure Preparation and Innovation Facility, or IPIF, and the Project Development and Monitoring Facility Fund, or PDMF, not just allow the government to accelerate progress in project development, but also grant access to international experts, technical expertise, ultimately delivering our infrastructure projects more effectively. We are stretching every peso to deliver the biggest bang per buck. Same term that expression used by Secretary RC. That means borrowing must be strategic and prudent. Thus, even as we have scaled up our economic investments, we continue to manage our obligations sustainably. Debts incurred through ODA only constitute a portion of national government debt, or about 14.9% of our total outstanding borrowings. Overall debt to GDP ratio is also expected to decline from 60.6% in 2024 to 56% in 2028. We also put great emphasis on the transparency of our borrowings. This principle has earned us the top spot in a recent global ranking on debt transparency out of 50 countries surveyed by the Institute of International Finance. We have also established a more stable, predictable, and fertile policy landscape to encourage the private sector to take on more proactive role in nation building. As also mentioned by Secretary Erci, the new Public-Private Partnership Code enables the government to allocate resources effectively while harnessing the private sector sector's expertise to expedite infrastructure projects and service delivery nationwide. The privatization of the NAIA Airport is a crowning testament to this. This is the largest PPP project under the Marcos administration to date, if not in history. This project has been on the government's drawing board for 3 decades, spanning 6 administrations. But through President Marcos' decisive leadership, the project won approval in a record-breaking 6 weeks and was awarded within 7 months. This is a clear demonstration of what great teamwork between the government and the private sector can achieve. Other important PPP projects approved under the current administration are the upgrade, expansion, operations, and maintenance of the Bohol Panglao International Airport and the Laguindingan International Airport, the UPPGH Cancer Center, and the Dialysis Center of the Baguio General Hospital Medical Center. In the pipeline are other big-ticket PPP projects in rail, airports, toll roads, power, and water sector. We are refining our list of 185 infrastructure flagship projects to include other purely private sector investments, which would enjoy the streamlined processes of securing permits and approvals to hasten, therefore, the implementation of strategic projects the country needs. The government has also started combining various financing modalities into a more flexible and versatile approach in funding infrastructure projects. Under a hybrid PPP, for instance, civil works are funded through ODA financing, while the private sector will be engaged to operate and maintain the same facility. This results in a more cost-effective method of providing the facility, as the government can borrow at concessional rates and at the same time benefit from the private sector's proven capacity to operate infrastructure facilities more efficiently. Out of the 185 IFPs, 8 are considered for hybrid financing, combining ODA, PPP, and GAA financing. Overall, the current IFP would involve a total investment of about 9.5 trillion, with 82 projects funded by ODA, 43 projects as PPPs, while the rest would be locally funded or a combination of these financing modalities. Rest assured, the Department of Finance is working diligently to secure sustainable and uninterrupted funding for our infrastructure projects so that their economic benefits are felt by the Filipinos at the soonest possible time. We are committed to ushering in a future where all Filipinos can reap the benefits of the seamless movement of goods and people across the archipelago to facilitate faster economic growth and prosperity for all. This is the promise of Bagong Pilipinas. We are fully committed to achieve this vision, calling on stakeholders, particularly media, to participate actively in the development process. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Susunod, paano nga ba mahati-hati ang allocated budget para sa Build Better More infrastructure projects? Tutukan yan kasama si Department of Budget and Management Assistant Secretary Romeo Matthew Balangki.
Isang pagbati sa ating mga programang nominado sa Content Asia Awards 2024. Schoolmates, nominee for Best Asian Talk Show. Masters of the Game, nominee for Best Sports Magazine Program. Patuloy kaming lilikha ng mga dekalidad na programa para sa bayan at sa bagong Pilipinas.
In a world and time when so much is changing, there is still so much of our culture that has to be documented and kept alive. Who are the bearers of these precious living cultures? How do they pass on a knowledge transmitted through the ages? What they represent has survived colonization, conflict, marginalization, and yet they persist. Sila ang sisidlan, the living vessels that store dayaw, our knowledge, our pride.
Dayaw, a celebration of Filipino culture and heritage with Senator Loren Ligarda. only on your People's Television.
Kanina ay naipaliwanag na ang nakalaang budget para sa Build Better More programs. Ngayon naman ay mas masisiyasat pa kung ano-ano ang magiging alokasyon ng pondo sa ilalim ng Department of Budget and Management kasama si Assistant Secretary Romeo Matthew Balangkit.
From here, from the graph, it can be gleaned that our infrastructure facilities and services remain inadequate in terms of accessibility, quality, safety, and affordability. So to address this problem, the administration has embarked on a massive infrastructure development program, which is at the front and center of the Philippine strategy. As contained in our Philippine Development Plan for 2023 to 2028, in order to enable economic transformation for a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient society, the overarching objective for the infrastructure sector is to build better more. Revenue mobilization strategies will be underpinned by tax administration reforms and strategic generation of non-tax revenues. Revenue effort will be raised from 15.7% of GDP actual in 2023 to 16.9% by 2028. As such, revenue collections are projected to reach 4.6 trillion in 2025 and further rise to 6.2 trillion by 2028. And on the disbursement side, you'll see that will continue to be growth inducing, that kind of spending that we are trying to promote here. So sustaining our significant investment in infrastructure, economic and social development programs, spending is projected at 6.182 trillion in 2025 from this year's 5.754 trillion program and last year's 5.336 trillion outturn. So it will average nearly 21% of GDP for the next 4 years, reaching 7.6 trillion by 2028. And more specifically, the overall infrastructure investments will be maintained at between 5 to 6% of GDP. So looking at this graph, you'll see that our expenditure program over the medium term is going down. That is our spending to GDP ratio. But in actual terms, absolute terms, it's actually increasing. So we are really bent on funding the government programs so that we'll be able to induce economic growth. So we don't mind spending more for as long as we see that the economy is really growing faster. So now let me provide an overview of the full year or fiscal year 2024 national budget. So the budget this year is set at 5.768 trillion and is centered on the theme Agenda for Prosperity, Securing a Future-Proof and Sustainable Economy. This is equivalent to 21.8% of GDP and is 9.5% higher than the 2023 national budget of 5.268. So this budget will aim at fostering social and economic transformation through infrastructure development, food security, digital transformation, and human capital development, recognizing the challenges posed by competing demands amidst resource constraints. In the next slide, you'll see the picture of the pie, by sector. You'll see here, as with previous years, the biggest allocation is provided to social services sector, amounting to 2.116 trillion or 36.7% of the national budget. Economic services sector likewise receives a large chunk of the budget at 1.77 trillion or 30.8%. As in previous years and consistent with the current administration's goal to create more jobs, reduce poverty, usher in social and economic transformation, and accelerate economic recovery, these two sectors remain the government's top priorities. Okay? So, but you see, for this year, the economic services which includes infrastructure development activities, have increased, has the highest increase, no, when it comes to growth. I think it's around 9%, whereas social sector, social services, has increased only by 7%. Yet social services still gets the lion's share. Okay, then we zoom into these economic services, and this is now our Build Better More program. So recognizing that infrastructure is the backbone of economy, this administration will continue to expand and increase access to Build Better More program, thereby strengthening industry linkages and fostering physical and digital connectivity by financing shovel-ready and near-completion programs, activities, and projects across infrastructure, transportation, and digital sectors. Likewise, the Build Better More program seeks to usher in the golden age of infrastructure for the country, assures the continuity of the country's infrastructure development agenda. Infrastructure budget in the fiscal year 2024 GAA amounts to 1.510 trillion, equivalent to 5.7% of GDP. This is 180.2 billion or 13.5% higher than last year's budget on infrastructure. In the next slide, the bulk of the infrastructure budget is intended for road networks and flood control infrastructures amounting to 521.27 billion and 352.78 billion respectively. The level also includes infrastructure transfers to LGUs, particularly the 174.28 billion under national tax allotment of LGUs. Significant amount is also provided for social infrastructures, with some 42.15 billion for school buildings, 23.32 billion for hospital and health centers, and 2.89 billion for housing and community facilities. Similarly, the agriculture and environmental sectors will be provided with some 56.82 billion for irrigation systems and 940 million for reforestation projects. The national government, in the next slide please, likewise supports the allocation for the infrastructure flagship projects. The IFPs are game-changing, transformative and urgently needed infrastructure projects of national significance that aim to showcase the overall Build Better More program. The projects highlight the efforts of the NG in pushing the infrastructure agenda of the administration. The NEDA has been designated as the lead agency that will monitor the implementation of the IFPs as part of its monitoring functions. And this brings me also to my second to the last slides, wherein I just want to highlight here the 185 IFP projects of under NEDA's lens, and I want to highlight here the 43 PPP projects that are in there, almost 29%, and this is really a big support for the national government, knowing that the private sector is really keen on contributing really for the this thing of the infrastructure development agenda of the administration. So this gives us a lot of breathing space, so to say, now that the private sector is very much part of the game now. So there, and then in my last slide, I think Yusek Rolly already mentioned this one, but I cannot really overemphasize the importance of the PPP code. No? So the government will expand its strategic co-investments with the private sector through public-private partnerships. By partnering with the private sector, we hope to boost financing and harness the sector's advanced technical expertise in transforming the Philippine economy. The recent enactment of the new PPP code and the issuance of its implementing rules and regulations will further simplify the evaluation process and create a unified system for investors to refer to when engaging in PPP projects. But even with the simplified evaluation process, the quality and inclusivity of PPP projects will not be compromised. Hence, also integrated our gender equality, disability, and social inclusion requirements, as well as climate change and environmental standards as non-negotiable preconditions for approving PPP projects. This shall ensure that PPP projects are gender responsive and climate resilient. So that's my last slide. Thank you very much for listening.
Matapos mailatag ng tatlong ahensya ang kanilang mga hakbang para sa Build Better More program, sunod naman silang sumalang sa panel discussion para mas maipaliwanag pa ang layunin ng programa.
So before we entertain questions from our media friends and from government communicators, would like to ask this general question for all of you. Here, in identifying high-impact projects under the expanded Build Better More program, what are your priorities and how do these align with the Bagong Pilipinas brand of governance and leadership under the Marcos administration?
The identification of of high-impact projects starts with the inclusion of what we call the public investment program. Our priority for inclusion. That's a long list that is updated every year, no? And out of those, we identify the flagship investment program. That's where our 185 IFPs come from. They are they come in as a result of newly approved PPPs that go through a screening process, approval process by the NEDA board. And of course, for the priority for implementation and for funding by the DBM and other sources of funds for like the ODA and PPP, the issue of readiness is a major factor, and the shovel, particularly shovel-ready projects are a high priority. So those are the some of the important considerations that we take in. But obviously, they are all high impact in the sense of their being responsive to the Philippine Development Plan 2023 to 2028. They have been identified as key projects in those, and they are also consistent with the 8-point socioeconomic agenda of the President.
If you look at the entire spectrum of our country, which is archipelagic, and you will see also in the bias or in the way IFPs have been allocated, physical connectivity is primarily important. No? Both physical and cyber connectivity, the whole idea of reducing the cost of moving goods, people, and services across the archipelago would allow us to spread the fruits of development rather than concentrate in the traditional NCR and its conurbation. No? But this is not to say that we would slide away from Metro Manila, because we need to compete with other cities in the region and elsewhere. So connectivity is important, and in our discussions with investors, the common concerns would be power, the power sector, and we're doing a lot of not only going into the renewable energy, but also ensuring that we have dependable, affordable, and secure energy.
We just align ourselves with the priority agenda set by NEDA. I think that's something very important, so that there will be clear alignment of goals. So Sec RC mentioned about the 8-point socioeconomic agenda, the PDP, the IFPs. So these are the ones that we are giving premium when it comes to budgetary allocation. It's not something that this can take some time and we will park it. No. So at least on our part, once this is identified as an IFP, then clearly it has to be given a priority when it comes to funding. I just want to highlight one specific item in the 8-point social agenda, which is also connected to what Yusek Rolly has mentioned about connectivity. This one is on the bureaucratic efficiency, and our secretary is really very keen on pushing further the limits of digitalization among government agencies. I think we will be saving a lot of money when we improve our processes, our procedures. No? And we are also helping DOF is also in that same line. We are on the same page here. They're thinking of tax collections, and that's why they're digitalizing the processes being done by BOC and BIR. So in our case, we're trying to promote these things through the ISSP, through the MITHI program, through the help of the DICT also. We're trying to revive and really make it really stronger this time so that procedures are really becoming streamlined and then very fast. No, I think that's something that we're losing money there. No, in the delays of the bureaucratic activities. So I think this is something that we would really want to address in this administration.
What are the candidate projects that you're looking at? How soon can we see this refined IFP list?
We're looking at how we could support private investments in water and power sector, no? Which is not really getting a partnership with government directly in terms of financing, but getting them into those sectors, as we have seen in other countries. So those guidelines are, I think, being crafted right now under Infracom, Mr. Secretary.
Sec RC, how soon can we have those guidelines, and how soon can we see these projects entering the IFP list?
We are prioritizing also the passage of the Department of Water Resources. We hope to get that measure passed within the remaining period of the 19th Congress.
Prelude to that inclusion of private sector investments, no? EO 59 and its guidelines already clears the way for speeding up permitting, approval. Alam mo, when you do a lot of, even if you were private sector, agencies would have their own set of rules and procedures to allow, approve excavation. Now we're looking at it coherently and cohesively.
It was mentioned a while ago that the country's unemployment rate has gone down. How much can we attribute that to the Build Better More infrastructure?
The public housing program, the 4PH program that is now that's being rolled out, that is a significant contributor to the improvement in that statistics, no? in that method. But I should also note that the public sector is just a small part of the economy. It's really the bigger part, much bigger part is the private sector. No? So that's why we are trying to we are working hard to improve that investment climate faced by the private sector, because they are the ones who are really driving the economy. The best that we could do in the government is to enable that environment so that the private sector can work effectively and can invest with certainty.
What can you say to the observation that many of the infrastructure projects that have been already completed mostly just benefit people with cars?
No, actually, I don't think that's a fair assessment. The objective is to connect the leading and lagging regions. As you can see, a lot of these projects outside of, are projecting outside of Metro Manila. No? Even the LRT 7, for example, is projecting going to Bulacan. The one with and LRT 1 also going to the south, no? in Cavite, and so the intention is to spread development. That way you can reduce that traffic by cars or otherwise within Metro Manila. Obviously, and you have heard the President, our priority is mass transit. Mass transit. That's why we are building now that subway. It's a very expensive project, but we needed a mass transit decades ago. But it's only now that we are investing there. We are building more railways. Manila and project, as I said, even extending them outside of Manila. We are also on the pre-feasibility study for phase for the development of that railway from Clark all the way to Ilocos region, and the development of the railway. Cargo and passenger all the way from Calamba to Batangas, and then from Calamba all the way to the Bicol region. Of course, we won't see that completed within the remaining administration because that will require quite a long time to complete. But what we are already preparing the groundworks, including possibly getting the financing for that before the end of this administration, so that when the next administration comes, they also have something to work on right away. They don't have to start from scratch or from zero. There is already something that they can implement, just like the way we did. There were already projects that were there, and we needed to complete and to enhance, ensure that those are implemented at that time.
And then also, apart from the mass transportation, the administration right now is also investing a lot on still continuing this thing of the farm to market roads, which would really benefit a lot of our farmers. But also the infrastructure projects is devoted to agricultural sector. So these are actually not car-oriented infrastructures. You'll be surprised, even DAR, they have also invested on some modular bridges to reach out to people who are really at those who cannot be reached by the normal roads. So they're also facilitating these kinds of interconnectivity, really for people.
Just a small technical note to your question. It depends really. We're now moving into the metrics of moving people than moving cars. Because if your metric is average annual daily traffic rather than how many people would use the corridor, then you would have a you would slant yourself towards the particular technical solution you would look at. So this is an awareness that we are bringing in when we evaluate projects.
We are pushing for amendments to the right-of-way law to help speed up these infrastructure projects. What specific changes, what specific amendments to the law are we seeing na pwedeng mag-resolve the issues that we're facing?
One is the valuation of property, whether it's land or improvements on those lands. Faster and more efficient way of resolving conflicts between the private owner and the government, so that procurement is not delayed, but at the same time ensuring fairness and all the necessary constitutional guarantees with respect to ownership of property.
Yeah, and the just compensation, of course, sir. Yeah, you said what?
Yeah, without going to the specific provisions, one of the problems with the current system is the expropriation. When you file for expropriation, it's a very long, tedious process, and we are finding ways to speed it up that would be fair to both the landowner and to government enjoying the benefits of development.
Mga hakbang sa pagbuo ng infrastructure project sa kauna-unang smart and green metropolis sa bansa sa tulong ng foreign and private sector, alamin